I'm with the Royal BC Museum, and my job and Kaylee's job is just to be touring this exhibit around and basically interpreting it. So that just means answering any questions that anyone has about any of the species that we have here displayed, or sort of referring them to resources that they could use in their community to help support the species that are at risk in their community. So this exhibit has been going for 3 years, so there's been 3 different summers. The first summer it was in the Kootenays, last summer it was in the Okanagan, and this summer we're touring around the Peace region. The purpose of it is really to be raising awareness about the species at risk all over BC and in the specific regions that it's touring, and to really just sort of start a dialogue about what people can do about the species that are at risk in the province right now. There's a lot of different ways that it's measured. I mean, it really depends on the population that you're studying. With caribou, scientists have put collars on different caribou populations to monitor their behavior so that they can trace where they're tending to die more frequently, and what kinds of things they tend to eat and where their migration routes are. In terms of bees, there's a bee count, so scientists actually go out into the field and sort of recruit the public to help them just count bumblebees in different areas, just to try to get a measure of how many are left. With insects, it's always really difficult just because there's so many of them that it's really hard to get a good sense. It depends on the type of animal that you're studying, but a lot of work is being done, especially by the museum, just to collect samples, observe, and sort of try to monitor how populations are changing over time. And again, it's so broad, like there's so many different factors. Obviously, a big one that we can't really control fully at this point. We still have input and there's still a chance to sort of change it, but climate change is a big one. There's a lot of different species that are being impacted by that. One example is the Vancouver Island marmot, which is the most endangered mammal in all of North America. Climate change is pushing the tree line further up the mountain, so it likes subalpine meadows, and pushing the tree line up the mountain means that it will be pushing forest predators up the mountain as well, which is another risk factor for it. Climate change will also be pushing a lot of species that tend to be further south, further north, which will just be changing ecosystems. Ecosystems everywhere will be changing with climate change, so that's a big factor. Also human activity, so human development, just housing developments, logging, just any kind of alteration of the environment. When done on a small scale, it doesn't usually have that big of a difference. But on the scale that we're looking at now, in terms of how much human activity is being done in the province, that is having a huge impact on a lot of different species. So just raising awareness about that. Obviously there's no quick fix because we all use the products of these kinds of developments and these kinds of activities. We can't just say stop it altogether, but it's about sort of balancing the needs of everything in the environment. Like, we always get interesting questions that I mean, almost every day we get a question that we actually don't know, which is pretty neat. Sometimes it's very specific, like how many sea otters are there exactly right now? And we're just like, that's a great question. Like, we don't know specifically. We usually point them towards resources that would help them discover the answer. So we have a lot of knowledge just in terms of what's out there for people to learn about that sort of thing. But a lot of questions are just general knowledge and curiosity, which we really like to just talk about, because that really is what we're here to do, is just sort of to have discussions with people about what they've seen and what they're curious about and what they want to know more about. And their experience of the species that we're talking about in their region. That's really what we want to be sort of discussing. So it's really nice when people ask us questions. So all of these little boxes, we've got 4 mini museums is what they're called, and they all are examples of species in the Peace region specifically that are at risk. So the one that we've got here is the slender gentian, but the one that I'll just talk a little bit here is the woodland caribou. And so the caribou, we've been having a lot of talks. I think there's a lot of awareness about the caribou being at risk up here already, just because a lot of the activity here is what's contributing to it. So anyone who wants to raise awareness about the caribou does that here, because it's so important that people know about that here. But the woodland caribou is at risk right now because of human activity, unfortunately. Primarily, it migrates. So there's 4 different types of woodland caribou, and they all migrate. The caribou needs a huge sort of swath of territory while they're migrating to support them, just in terms of what they're eating and to protect them from predators. Activities like logging or development, or even building roads, or even wind turbines, which feels like it's environmentally friendly, but in this particular instance, even wind turbine patches will open up these sort of roads for predators to walk on, which cut across caribou territory while they migrate, which just increases the chance that they're going to be caught by predators as well. So the caribou is really important to know about in this region, just to sort of bear in mind when developments are happening or when any decisions are being made in terms of where to build roads or where to go ATVing even, or any kind of human activity in the wilderness here. The caribou could really easily be affected by. So that's an important one to talk about. The BC Conservation Data Collection Centre has a website called NatureServe, and if there's any specific species that you want to learn about, you type in NatureServe Explorer, and you can type in any species that you're interested in, and it will tell you all about sort of its status right now, what can be done to help preserve it, how the populations are doing right now, and what kind of research is being done to support it. Also specifically in the specific regions, just to learn about the species that are at risk up here, any local conservation centers that you can find are always good resources. They've already done a lot of research on the species that are specific to this region, so they're always a good place to start too. Obviously, if you're in Victoria and you want to learn more about species at risk, the museum is a phenomenal place to go and visit because you can ask tons of questions. If you're in a more remote area, there is a learning portal that you can view on the Royal BC Museum's website. So if you just type in Royal BC Museum Species at Risk Learning Portal, there's a huge amount of information on the species that are in our exhibit that you can learn more about online. So all of these amphibians here are mainly in the Okanagan. This guy here is the tiger salamander, and he breathes and drinks through his skin. This guy is the leopard frog, and this little teeny fellow in the back is the spadefoot toad. They are all at risk right now because of a lowering water table in the Okanagan due to agricultural practices. Just so much water is used, obviously, in producing food that it's lowering the water table there right now, and these guys all lay their eggs in ponds and puddles and small bodies of water that are actually sort of drying up before their eggs get a chance to hatch. So this little fish here, or rather it's a large fish, is the Dragon Lake whitefish. There's lots of different kinds of whitefish, but there was only one lake, Dragon Lake, evidently, where this particular type of whitefish existed, and it's actually gone extinct. It's been extinct since the 60s. The reason why we have this extinct species here, and we also talk about the Dawson caribou, which is also extinct now, is just a sort of a signal to show what could happen if research isn't done to monitor populations and if actions aren't taken based on the research that we've done to sort of protect species like this. This also actually went extinct because of people sort of put toxins in the lake to try to clean it out for fishing purposes, which wasn't really properly researched because they didn't really realize, I suppose, that this was the only location of this particular species. So this is a really good sort of warning sign on like what could happen if you take action that hasn't been properly researched or hasn't been properly thought through, because this guy is not coming back. There's other types of whitefish, but he's gone, which is pretty sad. This little bird here is the meadowlark. A lot of people who we talk to actually recognize the meadowlark, which is surprising because they are actually in the Okanagan right now. They have a very distinctive song. Apparently they're quite shy, and what you usually hear is their song. You don't usually see them. And they like to build their nests in small bushes that have been cut down to make room for crops in the Okanagan. So that's why these guys are at risk, is just because their habitat is being fragmented right now.
Yeah, so there are a lot of different things that people can do. It really looks at doing, like, you can do smaller things or you can do larger things. Smaller things such as building, or having a native plant garden is really essential for pollinators such as the bees, because as we all know, those are going at risk, and bees are very important because they create our food and that. So something like that, or even creating community events where you go around and if you create a community event, you can go around and pick up garbage and do different events in that in your area to really bring awareness. But the major thing you can do to help species at risk is to educate yourself, and is to get to know the local species in your community that are at risk, so that when decisions are being made in regards to these different species, that you're well informed and you know how you can contribute to making a difference in those species' lives, basically, and how you can help save them. People really enjoy just coming around and looking at the taxidermied marmot and the meadowlarks that we have. Kids especially like seeing that. And then of course the Dragon Lake whitefish is something that really interests people up here since it's closer to the north, because Dragon Lake is near Quesnel. So people really find that interesting. But yeah, we get lots of good questions. Of course, there's so much information that it's hard to know everything. So an area you can go to if you have any questions is it's called the Learning Portal on the Royal BC Museum's website. and you can go there and it'll take you through the entire exhibit, and it will basically answer any question you might have about any of the species that are at risk in BC. So that is a great tool to use. I would definitely recommend it. What's left behind is a sense of just engagement with the community. So we really create a conversation with the people, and they all leave feeling a little bit more inspired to do something. So this exhibit itself can be really depressing if we're just to say, oh, look at all these species that are at risk. But it's really looking at, well, what can an individual do? And it's like, well, let's plant a native plant garden and don't feed the wildlife. So there's a lot of hope that comes around, and people are feeling hopeful after we come through. We leave behind 4 mini museums, and so they're just these little boxes that have interactive pieces that you can kind of look at and there's activities in them. And so we have 4 different mini museums for the Peace region. So that would be the caribou, the slender gentian flower, the river jewel-winged dragonfly, and the hot water physa. And so we leave that behind with the Aboriginal School District this summer, in a few days actually. And so they'll have that for, I believe, the year, and they'll be able to interact and learn about those different species which are in this area.
So tell me what you think of the exhibit here today.
It's really, really cool.
What do you like about it?
Well, ironically, it shows an animal that I used to have as a pet, tiger salamander. Fun fact, tiger salamanders are the largest land salamanders in the world.
Wow, and did you learn that here today?
Oh no, I've known that for a while.
Okay, and what did you learn here today? Anything specific?
Well, I learned about those birds that I'm gonna have to keep an eye out for. Also, why are there juncos up here? They're like a little robin-sized bird, yellow belly, black back. Also a yellow beak. They came through this spring. They're apparently from South America or something. I love books, specifically encyclopedias. Well, it was one of the encyclopedias has a lot of marine life listed. There's always something to learn.